Welcome to the Cult is King podcast. I'm your host, Rambling Bones, joined by my co-host, the Duke.
Salutations.
And Duke, what is it that we do here?
We just go through the world of cult movies. Those movies that are really good, but the world just does not recognize that they're really good.
Exactly. And I picked a really good movie.
I would even go as far to say really, really, really good movie.
I would second that. I picked Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and it's a really good movie.
Well, I tell you what, Bones, why don't you give people just kind of a short idea of what we watched?
This movie it's a parody of monster movies, and it's very light on the plot.
Very.
The sort of kind of plot is tomatoes are ravaging America, killing and pillaging and whatnot. And so the president is hired his top investigator, I guess, to go and investigate the tomato menace.
And by that, we mean him and like a bunch of random guys.
Yeah, Mason Dixon and 4 other people who are completely useless. There's also a reporter trying to get the scoop on the tomato menace. She's not very good at her job. And yeah, that's the plot really. It's mostly just tomato havoc, and every now and then we go back to Mason Dixon fumbling his way through an investigation.
Now, to give you an idea of what we mean by tomato havoc, okay, keep in mind that this is 1978, and not only is it 1978, but it's 1978, and this movie has no budget. So when we say, like, tomato action, we mean, like, somebody's swimming and it's playing, like, Jaws-esque music while they're just actual tomatoes floating in the water.
Yeah, there's just some tomatoes bobbing, and
people being chased by tomatoes just being rolled down the street. Or just tomatoes being thrown off screen at people. It's absolutely wonderful.
I think actually this movie's strength is the fact that the tomatoes aren't puppets. There's nothing special about the tomatoes. They're just tomatoes. Now, there are some giant tomatoes later that are, I don't know what they're necessarily made out of, but there's nothing special about them other than they're just really large and also moving down the street.
And yeah, the only thing, they make this garbled like noise, but higher than that.
It's mostly just tomatoes being rolled at people. Or in one of the early action scenes, there's all these cops in a field, and there's just tomatoes that I think, you know, every now and then one gets rolled, but for the most part, they're just tomatoes sitting in the middle of this field while cops shoot them.
No, this movie is, as Bones said, it's pretty light on plot, but I mean, it's mostly just a series of gags.
Yeah,
they have a, like, connecting through line.
I'm not really an expert on the history of parody movies, but a year before this, we had Kentucky Fried Movie. 1980, I believe, was Airplane. So a stream of parody films making fun of whatever.
I think Airplane is a good comparison to this movie. The humor is a little different, but Airplane's another one of those things where it's just, there is sort of like a cast of characters and kind of a story, but it's mostly just a bunch of connected gags of just the silliest crap possible.
Yeah.
And that's what this is.
I would say that this is turned up to 11 when it comes to the amount of gags and how light it is on plot.
If you don't mind me interjecting here, I think that's part of the strength with this one. Because, look, they have a million goofy jokes, and if you think one's really lame, well, it doesn't matter. The movie doesn't do that thing where it like zooms in or pauses for you to laugh so you know that it's supposed to be funny. It just moves on to the next joke, which then just moves on to the next joke. It's just a constant train of them.
Yeah, it's very much the school of spray and pray when it comes to telling jokes, and a lot of them fall flat, a lot of them, but there's also a lot that hit really hard.
And the thing is the ones that hit always hit out of nowhere, because nothing's telegraphed.
No, I appreciate that style, because I've seen a lot of bad comedies. This movie's so stupid that
It's brilliant.
it's brilliant. Well, maybe not brilliant, but it's so stupid that things that might be a detriment to other comedies really help it. Like, I think like Groundhog Day or Ghostbusters, something like that, would be really bad off if they went for the let's tell as many jokes as possible. Now, mind you, those movies are made by intelligent folk, and these movies were made by this movie, which later got sequels,
3 of them.
3 of them, was made by the same 3 guys over and over again. That's another thing. Our section on casting crew will be pretty much non-existent. No, you will recognize nobody in this movie, and
Very few of them were ever in another movie.
most of them were in maybe 5 other films, and the guys who made this movie, their whole shtick was, let's just keep making this movie.
This movie definitely has the energy of, like, a couple friends being like, you know what would be funny? A movie where tomatoes kill people, and then they just ran with it. I mean, it almost has the energy, even though it was made in the 70s, of like an early like YouTube video of people just going out and doing what they thought was funny for the camera.
Something interesting about this movie is the fact that it is an independent film, and nowadays, anybody can go out and make an independent film of varying quality. And they went out and chose to make a parody of monster movies with tomatoes. I mean, it's low budget, but they sunk quite a bit. I don't have any exact figures, but I've heard anywhere
I've got
between 90 and 100,000.
I checked a couple different sources, and all of them said around $100,000. Wikipedia claims that it was $100,000 and 420, which is funny.
Well, I'd be a little curious about that last little figure on Wikipedia there.
But I mean, while that's nothing for a movie, that's not nothing for people trying to make a movie without any studio backing.
Note, though, on the budget, though, I mentioned the scene where the cops are shooting tomatoes in a field. There's a helicopter crash in that scene. That was an accident.
In fact, that helicopter scene cost the movie more than the rest of the cost for the movie combined.
Yeah, it was over half of the budget.
But they have this helicopter in this field, and it was supposed to land behind them while they're fighting off the tomatoes, but the rotor touched the ground, and basically this helicopter goes down. And what's funny is the pilot wasn't harmed, but they just pulled him out and then ad-libbed the rest.
Yeah.
They just made it part of the movie, which it's kind of an extra funny scene.
Well, now the question becomes, did they have a budget of $100,000 and then there was an accident and now we're out half our money and we got to make this movie on, $50,000, $40,000, whatever? Or was it we have $50,000 to $40,000 to make this movie and now we've just had this horrible accident and out of our own pockets we're paying however much it costs to fix the helicopter, or there's no fixing that, to replace the helicopter. So how much was the budget prior versus after the helicopter
I have
crash?
no idea, but the fact that they blame it on kamikaze tomatoes really sells it for me.
Well, what's even better about that scene is the fact that they had 2 different cameras going. It looks like the focus of the scene was supposed to be the helicopter crash, but they just lucked out in having multiple cameras to film it. And I guess the camera people were like, ooh, I guess I should point more at that.
Well, and you know what, though? It worked out for them. I'm sure this movie has made a lot more since it became a cult film and home video became a thing. But this movie did make about 5 times its budget.
I mean,
just in box office.
They made 3 other sequels.
And a cartoon.
And a
video game based on the cartoon.
I think there were 2 video games, actually.
It's funny because this is like, as for like low budget underground as this is, it's a little franchise.
Yeah, it's weird that it has a little franchise because a lot of the reviews and reception I saw, this movie isn't beloved even by the people it should be beloved by, if that makes sense. I mean, there's definitely people like us who really like it, and
Yeah,
it's
I
got a
would say,
cult group.
yeah, definitely. I would say even a number of them, but no, when it first came out, and even on Rotten Tomatoes, interestingly enough, it's got like a incredibly low score. That being said, I mean, heck, I was at a convention the other day, and I was going through tables and stuff, and they had a bunch of like cult movie magnets and stuff. And I mean, there was Attack of the Killer Tomatoes there. I've seen T-shirts and stuff. Like, there are people following this movie who aren't just the two of us.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd say this movie is more cult than a lot of the cult movies we've covered.
Yeah, this is definitely, I would say, more cult than, like, for instance, Flash Gordon.
Yeah. It's surprisingly competent, too. Now, within the first 10 minutes, I think some of the audio dialogue is a little poor, but once you get past that, you can understand what people are saying and doing.
But they at least get the feeling they knew how to work their own equipment.
Yeah, no.
Which you would assume would be, you know, if you're going to sink any amount of money, even if it's into a cheap movie, you think you would do that. But that's not always the case.
However, the three guys who made it, they all three wrote it. And I don't know if adding a fourth writer would have improved it or made it worse. Like, did we need to add writers or remove writers?
I can't speak to the sequels because I have not seen them all. I remember seeing part of one and thinking, wow, I really prefer the first one. But I don't know. I kind of like the movie the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was a little apprehensive before we watched it because both of us watched this movie as kids. So I saw this movie a bunch, but it's been many years since the last time I watched it. So I'm like, man, am I going to just think this is the lamest thing ever now? And I don't know. I might have laughed harder.
Yeah, I was afraid that it wouldn't hold up or that I would remember all of the jokes. I mean, I remembered most of the jokes, but it wasn't as bad as something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where you can mouth the words before they even happen.
Yeah, I love that movie, but I don't know if I could review it for a while just because I don't have to watch the movie. I could close my eyes right now, be out for an hour and a half, and just play it in my head.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
Yeah, and I was afraid that it was going to be a bit like that, but it wasn't. I mean, the opening to the movie is the opening credits to the movie are funny. They have a very catchy theme song going, and most of the credits are just troll credits. I mean,
Right.
you've got like some of the cast and crew, but one of them is introducing Miss Potato Famine 1928.
Which she does appear in the film later.
She does appear in the film later. So I guess it was a reverse troll, but there's another part where it just says this space available for rent or something.
There's a constant like gag throughout the movie that the movie is like sponsored or something by like some furniture store. So
Mhm.
they keep having like advertisements running across the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, just a text scroll of furniture wholesale.
And I mean, this is not terribly sophisticated humor, but it is humor befitting a movie called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
I think another thing about this movie, I think it's maybe misunderstood. Like, it should be obvious, I think, from the first 5 minutes that this movie is obviously parody. But I think it has a reputation with people that it's so bad it's good and not that it was intentionally trying to be funny.
Right, which, I mean,
You
I
could
don't know how
say,
you missed that, but I know people have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
you could say that it's a so bad it's good comedy because you think the comedy is garbage, but this movie was not, let's make a scary movie about tomatoes.
The thing is, though, I would even, for that, me, it's not even that, because there were times where it was trying to make me laugh, and I laughed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can't say it didn't work because though I maybe didn't laugh at every joke, I more than chuckled through a large section of this.
Yeah.
You know, it's just you got to turn your brain off and just enjoy the silliness. I think part of the reason I liked it too is just how different the comedy is from if it, would have been
Mhm.
made today. There's no biting satire here.
Yeah.
It's just goofy. It's not trying to say something about the movies necessarily. It's not trying to like appear smarter than it is. it's just there to be a movie about tomatoes, because wouldn't it be hilarious if tomatoes attacked people?
Well,
And I kind of respect that a little more than, I might have otherwise.
well, I think I saw, I don't know if it was Variety. It was one of these magazines that reviewed it, and their critique was that the satire wasn't biting enough. It's like, you're watching a movie called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Get the stick out of your butt and just watch.
Right.
Like, because there is a little bit of political satire, because the president is a character, and he's particularly dumb. Pretty much every scene you see him, his assistant has a big stack of pens. He takes one pen, writes his name on official presidential signing paper, crumples up the paper, throws away the pen, gets a new pen, and that's his whole thing.
But I mean, that's kind of, that's the political satire there.
Yeah.
Is that the president is kind of dumb.
Yeah, the president and your government suck, but it doesn't.
Then again, I can't find anybody in this movie who's kind of smart.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good, like, deadpan humor. One of my favorite bits is just Mason is driving down the road, and on the radio, it's like, the president shut down the last nuclear submarine facility. When asked why, he said, "Those silly little ships keep sinking anyway."
I also noticed when I was watching it this time around that there's a lot more background gags going around. Like, every frame has a joke in it. That was funny too.
There's a lot of little things in there. At the very end, so a little bit more about the plot, I guess, is throughout the movie you keep hearing this awful song called Puberty Love by Ronnie Desmond, which is 1 degree of separation away from Donny Osmond.
Right.
And Mason finds out that the tomatoes can't stand that song, so they lure them all into I guess it's like the San Diego Coliseum, wherever their big sports ball stadium is, and they play that song, but everyone in the stadium is, like, dressed up in some weird outfit, and it looks a lot like the either Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album or the Frank Zappa's We're Only in It for the Money.
Right. No, in fact, you want an interesting piece of trivia here for you?
Sure.
So, Puberty Love was sung by one Matt Cameron. He is would become the drummer for both Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. How's that for...
I wonder if that's how he got the job. He's like, hey, this is my hit, Puberty Love.
I got also another piece of trivia that would be especially interesting to you, Bones.
Does it have to do with Twin Peaks?
It sure does. Would you like to share?
Yeah. So in the Jaws-esque scene, there's just a boy on a boat for all of 2 seconds, and that boy is played by Dana Ashbrook, who is Bobby Briggs in Twin Peaks. Yeah, I'd say for cast and crew, those two are the people we could talk the most about as opposed to anybody else.
I will go ahead. I mean, they made the movie, so I'm going to go ahead and say their names.
Yeah, that's probably smart.
Our lead, Mason Dixon, is played by David Miller. Lois Fairchild was played by Sharon Taylor. The most notable of Mason's little entourage, Wilbur Finletter, who is constantly, he's like this SAS survival type dude, and he's got like a parachute behind him the whole time, was played by Stephen Peace. He also helped produce the film, I think.
Yeah, he's one of the 3 creators.
And then Jim Richardson, our evil secretary to the president, because nobody sits closer to power than the Secretary of State.
No, he's the press secretary.
The press secretary. The press secretary, that's right.
Nobody sits closer to power than the press secretary.
It was played by George Wilson. So, this was directed by John DeBello. It was also written by him along with Costa Dillon and Stephen Peace. So, they're kind of the connecting line between all of these movies.
Yeah, all together, I think they worked on a movie called Happy Hour as well. But other than that, it's like Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and there might be like a Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes.
And I think they attack Paris at some point.
Yeah. I've only ever seen a bit of one of the sequels. It might have been the second or the third sequel, but the tomatoes were puppets and they had mouths, and it
Something was lost.
yeah, something was lost. I don't know if they had more of a budget, because I think it was New World I think it was Roger Corman who gave them the monies.
The patron saint of B movies.
Yeah, but yeah, the jokes just really were not hitting like this movie's jokes hit, and yeah, I don't know. It didn't do it for me like this one did. Now the first sequel might be fine or better. I might have gotten into the end stage of the series.
Yeah, if you've seen any of these sequels, maybe like let us know in the comments what you thought about them, because for me right now, I have no experience with any of them.
No real desire to even dive into them. I believe the character of Finlatter, who's played by Stephen Peace, is the only like character that makes any sort of return in the sequels.
Oh yeah, because when I was looking at Mason Dixon stuff, I don't think he appeared in any other movies.
He appeared in some movies, but it was always like Punk or some other like small role. Yeah, I thought about writing down some stuff, but there's just nothing. There's nothing to talk about with our actors, sadly.
Right. No, but a lot of weird trivia.
Yeah, there's not really as far as the acting goes, you can tell nobody here's really an actor.
But it's all serviceable for.
But yeah,
the
it's all
movie.
pretty serviceable.
Nobody needs to give a nuanced performance in this.
Yeah.
They're here to set off the next gag.
There are some musical numbers though.
There are.
I think there's two, if I remember correctly. I feel like a third one is in the back of my head, but
I remember there's when the soldiers are singing as they're preparing to take on the tomatoes. At one point, the president hires basically a spin doctor to make it seem like the tomato crisis isn't that bad, and he has a musical number.
I'll say one musical number was enough. The numbers are not offensive to your ears, but they're also not super funny
Or necessary.
or necessary
But that's
or
kind of
catchy.
though. That's kind of what's funny about him is like, wow, why is there this crappy musical?
You see, that's the thing is you do it once, and
Yeah,
you know
twice
that's kind of
is too
funny.
much.
Twice is like, all right, one of the creators probably has some sort of musical chops and wanted to put their work into. Like the theme song is great,
Yeah,
but
I like that.
the musical numbers are not so great.
But once again, it comes from the style of filmmaking. This is throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So I'm not sure that they knew which of their jokes were funny. So they just put all of their jokes in there, and luckily enough, a handful of them were pretty funny.
When you see the PR, the Spin Doctors song, it feels like it's straight out of like a Rankin Bass film.
It does.
It's uncanny. I guess if Rankin Bass made a film about PR.
For the record, it was better than some of the musical numbers in Mad Monster Party.
It's not necessarily a high bar.
Just saying.
However, I do especially like some of the gags with the Spin Doctor.
Right.
For one, his plan to smooth out this whole tomato crisis is the tomato plant versus the nuclear plant.
Right. Feeling blue, tomatoes end it all for you.
Tomato plants do not create nuclear waste.
He also had like some short like little films where it's like one of them was a thing where he did where it's like this traffic cop is blind.
This traffic cop was just like any other traffic cop except he is blind.
And there's one that was even funnier, but I'm gonna leave that for you to find.
Yeah.
If you do decide to watch this movie, and look, if you have kind of a silly sense of humor, you should watch it because like I said, it made me laugh. But, I'm going to leave a few of these gags for you to see.
Yeah, since this movie is just gags.
If we listed every gag, then there would be nothing for you to enjoy for your first viewing.
Yeah, especially because we'd pick out all the ones that were funny and leave you with all the ones that weren't.
That being said, we have watched this multiple times, so some of the gags have held up to repeat viewings. There's one line towards the beginning in particular that always makes us laugh every time.
Yeah, no, I instantly know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to say it out loud for you, though. You'll have to find that one for yourself.
I mentioned the fact that maybe we could be minus a musical number, but I don't know about you, but I think this movie would benefit maybe if it had been 10 to maybe 20 minutes shorter. It's about an hour 27 minutes, I think is.
I thought it was a little bit more.
It might be a little bit longer, but I'm thinking this movie probably should have maxed out at an hour 10 minutes long. I think some of the fat could have been trimmed.
And and then it might have been a stronger viewing for it. That being said, like I said, the bad and the good are so mixed together that for every bad one, you immediately start to roll into one that's funny.
It would have probably been hard to chop this movie up since the bad and the good are so mixed up together.
Well, and I think, once again, I'm not sure they knew which of their jokes were the funny ones.
Well, they went on to keep making this movie over and over again, so maybe they aren't exactly the most
funnier.
Maybe they're not the most discerning of people. Or maybe they just knew that we got a good thing going, let's milk it till it's dry.
For the record, that's probably what I would have done. We probably would have had a tomato expanded universe at this point, buddy.
Hey.
If the Duke had been on top.
Once we've exhausted all of popular culture, the cult movie expanded universe is the next frontier to milk dry.
There we go.
Now, as far as parody movies go, how do you feel about this one compared to maybe like movies like Airplane or even some of those bad Wayans Brothers, like Scary Movie parodies that we got many years later?
I'm going to say it's better than a lot of them because some of them, especially like some of the Scary Movies, everybody's seen one that's made them laugh. But if you go back and watch them, you realize you laughed at 2 or 3 things. So, like I said, we said the strength of this one is that all the bad and the good are mixed together. So if you hit something that's not funny, something that's funny comes around.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, like, going back and watching some of the Scary Movies, there's, like, 2 or 3 things that are funny or that were funny when they're 10, and the rest is just pure misery.
Yeah.
So I would say already the fact that you can watch this one repeatedly and still laugh at it puts it ahead of most of the pack. Though I might personally enjoy it maybe a little bit more than Airplane, I would say that that's probably just my bias because it's about giant tomatoes. I would say that Airplane is probably still kind of the gold standard for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
I guess my favorite parody movie, now that I think about it, would probably be Young Frankenstein. I'd probably put that at the very top. But this movie's a lot more like Airplane than it is like Young Frankenstein.
I think that's really all we have to say about this movie. It's kind of a hard movie to discuss other than...
It's a bunch of gags.
It's just a bunch of jokes.
If you think that any of this sounds like it might be remotely interesting to you, there will be gags in there to make you laugh.
If you like watching monster movies that are bad from pre-70s and whatnot, I think this movie is a pretty good parody of a lot of those elements.
And if you thought Airplane was funny, you'll also think this is funny.
Yeah. It's a movie you will at least want to watch once.
Right. No, I have seen it more times than that.
We've both seen it more times than that. However, I think now that I'm a little older, I'll say it's a movie that you could watch maybe once every 5 years. Because we watched this again, was it last Monday or something? I don't remember. We watched it like a week ago. And I'd say if I watched it again tonight, it probably would not make me laugh as hard as it did last week.
But give it a few years.
But give it a few years, and it'll be funny again.
I think the world is better for this movie existing.
Yes, I'm glad I'm glad it exists. And yeah, that is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Duke, what are we gonna watch now?
We're gonna watch. I'd say a guilty pleasure of mine, but I don't know if I have guilty pleasures anymore.
I feel no guilt.
We're gonna watch 1956's World Without End.
That's like a completely normal and reasonable film to watch.
I really like this one.
And I think it's a movie people haven't seen.
It is. It's a movie that you probably haven't seen, but if you love 50s sci-fi, you'd probably love this one.
It'll be fun to talk about. And you can hear more about cult movies if you hit that there subscribe button and follow us on we have no social media because it's bad for you. But
yeah, we don't want things that are bad for you. Cult movies are about feeling good.
Yeah, they're about feeling good. And we're here to help you, not hinder you. So you can listen to us though on Castbox and Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube, of course. And
keep it cult, baby.
yeah.